What is going on, everyone? This is Miles with Windows Central Gaming, and welcome to the 31st episode of Xbox Chaturdays. Today, I am pumped to be joined by an amazing content creator and co-host of the Defining Duke podcast, MrMattyPlays. How are you doing on this fine Saturday, my man?
Doing well. It's good to have the weekend here. Feeling great, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we have a lot of juicy stuff to talk about today. It's been a very fascinating week in the gaming industry. So we're going to be talking about the latest developments with Konami partnering with Bloober to potentially make Silent Hill. We're going to be talking about Kojima signing a letter of intent with Xbox to make an Xbox exclusive. And we're going to be talking about some of the drama regarding Platform X. So I'm excited. You're a great person to have on with these topics. But before we get into all of that, I got to give a quick shout out to the 100 people already tuning in live. If you guys are digging the show, hit that like button, share it out, and let's get this party started. MrMattyPlays, for the people who don't know who you are, can you give them a quick breakdown of who you are, where they can find you, and why you love gaming?
So I go by MrMattyPlays. You can find me on YouTube, where I do all manner of content. I typically like to do news updates and RPG coverage, mostly Western RPGs, and my news falls into the category of course, the occasional trending topic, but more often than not, Bethesda, Xbox, BioWare, those seem to be my big three pillars, which is funny because that's what I grew up on. So to just kind of tap into one of your other questions on why I love gaming, it really is because of role-playing games. You know, I always not joked as a kid, but I always thought it was a dream as a kid to say, you know, man, I want one of these choose your own adventure games. Because I used to read the choose your own adventure books. I didn't know this thing called RPGs existed or D&D existed. And then I played Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic from BioWare, and the rest is history. I was like, oh my God, I can be me. I can choose what I want to say. And it was just a whole new level was unlocked, and it just never quite faded away. But beyond that, you can also find me hosting Defining Duke Cam Radio podcast. And let's see here. I occasionally stream, but I'm not over on Twitch anymore. So yeah, that's my general plugs.
Beautiful. Appreciate that. Again, I'm stoked to sit down with you. We got a bunch of super chats coming in already, so really appreciate the support there. Mr. Joanna Dark says, with Kojima no longer working with Sony and not having access to the Decima engine, what engine will he use on Xbox? id Tech, Slipspace, or Unreal Engine 5? That's a fascinating question. For now, Mr. Joanna Dark, I'm gonna wait because we're gonna dive into that a little deeper. We're gonna be talking all about Kojima's project with Xbox and what the possibilities are there. So I will rope in that engine talk once we get there. But appreciate the super chat. Another one from Mr. Joanna Dark. Happy Chatterday, gentlemen. Excited to spend my Saturday afternoon with you two fellas talking conspiracy theories and gaming shenanigans. And Mr. Joanna Dark, a third one. My God, man.
Wow. Feeling generous.
Feeling generous. All right. Would you prefer an original take on Silent Hill or a reimagining a la Capcom style? And which Silent Hill would you like them to reimagine? Silent Hill 1 or 2? What's your take? If they're doing this Silent Hill and it's a reimagining, 1 or 2, what's your go-to?
Well, here's the thing is I've actually never played Silent Hill. So for me, I think a reimagining would just naturally be the best path because, to be quite frank, I don't have an attachment to anything previously. I never was drawn to these games. Not that they're bad, but I was never drawn to them, quite honestly. So I feel like a reimagining would just work best for me because it would be a modernized take on, hopefully, right, what people like. We'll see how that pans out with the teams working on it. But, yeah, that would be my answer for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, let's be real, I love Silent Hill, but there hasn't been a great Silent Hill game or even really a good Silent Hill game in over a decade. So they have a lot of ground to make up. And there are the hardcore fans who love the series, want to see it come back. And then there are people like you who have never played a Silent Hill ever. And they need to have a game that comes out and anyone can jump in and play it and appreciate it for what it is. And I hope that's what they do with the next big Silent Hill release, is make this a kicking off point so people can experience what was great about the series originally, but be able to jump in and actually understand it and not have to be like, just because as much as I love the Resident Evil 2 remake, one of my favorite things, there's a lot of nostalgia to it. But at the same time, you can jump in and play it and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, it was one of that was like my first time playing Resident Evil 2, and for me, it worked. It worked fantastically. You know, it made me understand why people loved it in the first place, while modernizing certain mechanics so it was accessible to someone like myself, and got rid of the tank controls. I think that's a lead example of how a remake can really usher in a whole new audience. So yeah, I would love for someone to take a crack at and accomplish what that team did.
Yeah, it's one of those things when I played Resident Evil 2, the remake, it's what I imagined in my head as a kid playing that game. Like, obviously the graphics of the original are super dated, but back in the day, for its time when I was playing it, I imagined that it looked as good as what the Resident Evil 2 remake did. And I thought that was the kind of magic of what Capcom achieved with the Resident Evil 2 remake specifically.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. It's such a, it's funny because it was a game for me that had to marinate. When I beat it, I went, "Oh, that was good." And as time has gone on, I've loved it more and more. I don't know if you've ever had that with a game, but for me, I gradually liked Resident Evil 2 Remake over time. And I don't know if it was because I saw other games trying and failing, or you start to just realize all the right things they did, and the internet talk kind of catches up with you. But for me, yeah, that was one of those games that when I beat it, I was like, I get it, I like it, but I'm not in love with this. Now I love it. It's weird.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like sometimes you play a game and you finish it and you're like, I like that, but you haven't really articulated what was so great about it. And then as you sit on it long, you're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, you'll play another third person shooter and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel as good as Resident Evil 2, or this isn't as like engrossing. You're like, okay, you know what? Yeah, they killed it with that. So
yeah,
stoked.
it's why reviewing games is tough, because you gotta read your emotions pretty quickly and be right on top of it.
Absolutely. Another super chat from Space Dovahkiin. Mr. Matty and Miles Dompier, buckle up, fellas. Appreciate that.
Nice.
Aaron JF94 with the super chat says, Miles, get Matty on the Xbox 2. I'm not really one of the hosts of the Xbox 2. You'll probably need to refer to Rand on that one. JR,
I'll reach out.
Yeah, make it happen, Matty. JRLQ, Halo Wars 3 should explore the Forerunners, Flood, and Ancient Human Wars, giving the player the option to choose any of the three factions.
Cool idea.
Just saying. I mean, I dig it. To be honest, I need to finish Halo Wars 2. I haven't played the campaign for more than like 2 hours.
It's surprisingly more important to Halo Infinite than I think a lot of people are giving it credit for, with the Banished and everything. It's worth a playthrough for sure.
Yeah,
it's really good too. It was. I don't want to start the hot takes too soon here, but I genuinely thought it was better than Halo 5. So.
I mean, I heard from a campaign and story standpoint that it was one of the strongest Halo entries.
Yeah, I should have specified. Yeah.
So I need to beat it. I'll probably watch a YouTube recap of it, but I would like to play.
No one knows.
All right. Mr. Joanna Dark with another super chat. Miles, we were deprived of super chats last week. I have a status to maintain. Rainmaker is back. Appreciate you, dog. I guess I'll get into some housekeeping stuff. So yeah, last week I mentioned that with us merging with Future PLC Studio, that super chats and memberships were disabled. We had some meetings this week and they are now re-enabled. Re-enabled. Bunch of boring business stuff related to that we'll see how that all plays out. But for the interim, super chats are rolling as we've seen. So appreciate all the support so far. You guys are killing it. Let's get into the first topic, which is something that has been spicy, to say the least, on my Twitter feed this week. And to kick off a random weekday, Konami announces that they have enacted a strategic cooperative partnership with Bloober Team to basically share technology and develop games. They haven't confirmed any projects, but it has been basically assumed that Bloober Team now is effectively going to make one of the rumored Silent Hill projects. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. I know you have some takes on Bloober. I have some takes on Bloober as well. I think we're going to be in very opposite camps there.
Yeah.
So Maddie, when you saw the news that Bloober Team officially is partnering with Konami and will likely be making the next Silent Hill, how'd you feel? How did you feel about that?
Miles, I gotta be honest with you. I laughed. I laughed. This was hilarious news to me. I was like, "You're gonna choose them? Okay, I'm gonna try to be respectful." But it, I don't think Bloober Team's all that talented. I don't know how other way to slice it up than just that. I look at the medium. It was a game that was clearly inspired by something like Silent Hill, right? They got the original composer. I think that was probably one of the best parts of the game was just its very subtle soundtrack kind of peeking in and out. Um, you can tell they're fans of that. So maybe it will end up, I'll play devil's advocate with myself. Maybe it ends up matching up pretty well because this is the thing they really wanted to do. But the medium to me was hardly a game. And I mean that in the sense of playing something, doing something. You were just very often walking, slightly interacting, and not much was happening. It was I use the term aggressively boring. And to me, those games I'm much more hard on because they sort of meander rather than even if you did something, you did it poorly, you did something. Just to explain my logic behind it. So the medium is a game I now on my own podcast I just jokingly crank on all the time, but because it's not like the most awful thing, but for me, if I were Konami and I were holding the IP for a legendary horror franchise, what happened with the medium would not have encouraged me. It wouldn't have swayed me enough to go, okay, let's go sign them up and have them make an IP with one of our most popular licenses. I wouldn't jump that far. And if you ask me who to sub in, I really don't know. But Bloober Team wouldn't have been my pick. I can go on a little bit more, but I want to hear your thoughts. I feel like that's the more interesting part. You're someone who supports it, I believe, and so I want to know. I guess I don't mean this in a challenging way, but why do you think that? Why do you
Yeah,
think it's good?
no, I appreciate that. That's why I'm excited to have these conversations because we can talk, we can have different opinions, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be combative. I have been in the camp for quite some time, and people who watch this show, follow me on Twitter, have known that I have been championing Bloober Team as the team. If any team, any modern developer was tackling a Silent Hill, I have been championing Bloober Team as the pick. And so earlier this year, I went down the rabbit hole. I pulled up all the conspiracy theories because I've interviewed the team from the Medium and Bloober Team multiple times, and I've talked to them. And they are huge horror nerds. Everything they've done has been dedicated to horror. They are one of the only modern developers that, despite monetization, despite the business practices, horror is what they do. Horror is what they love. Every single person on that team references Silent Hill 2 as their biggest inspiration for making games. The reason they got into game development was Silent Hill 2. Listening to them geek out about working with Akira on the soundtrack of this, and then Akira looking at what this team is doing and telling this team that every single game Bloober makes going forward, he will work on the soundtrack for. Hearing someone like that, a legendary figure in the industry, talk about what is special about this team got me excited because I've been following them since early releases. Layers of Fear, Observer. I don't know if a lot of people that are criticizing Bloober Team, I don't think have played games like The Observer for the most part. The Observer is phenomenal.
I have heard really good things about that. It was that, and then Layers of Fear is the one that sometimes people leap to.
Exactly. Layers of Fear and Observer are incredible horror games. And I understand the criticisms of, walking simulators and stuff like the Medium not being that action oriented, and people associate some level of combat with Silent Hill, which I totally get. Historically, this team has been in the opposite camp. Like they have gone out of their way to not put combat and weapons in the game because a lot of times they feel like it can detract from the horror, and it becomes a lot less scary when you can just shoot the enemy in front of you. So I understand where they're coming from there, but then I start seeing them hiring combat animators, doing things that inherently are against what their practices have been, and that's when I knew deep down that they are working on Silent Hill because listening to them talk about like their stance on combat in horror. The only reason they would do that is if you're partnering with Konami, and Konami's going to say, hey, we understand what you guys do. We like what you do, but we need combat in Silent Hill. And so I believe Bloober Team again, they haven't made anything, in my opinion, that's on the same level of Silent Hill 2. I understand some of the criticisms. At the same time, this has been an independent horror developer independently publishing these games. Their budget has been tiny, their team has been tiny. And with small resources and a small team, I think they've put out some legitimately impressive titles. Whether it's to your taste, I personally do prefer combat. Like, I love Resident Evil because of the combat. That being said, I really enjoyed the medium. I loved the storytelling. I loved the world that they created. I loved the kind of unique dynamics that they had with the dual reality. So Bloober Team has really great ideas and they love horror. And so for me personally, that makes me feel like Bloober Team could, with the right resources, could deliver an incredible Silent Hill game.
It's really well said. I think you instill courage in me. Perhaps I'll swing the other way, but yeah, for me, I think it really does boil down to the resources at that point. The medium, to me, it didn't feel like it was short on resources. Like they didn't have enough to do something. It felt like they had a really good idea and they didn't do enough with it. Maybe that's what was left on the table and they had to just chop a couple mechanics off. But to me, that's what was missing was the game. And I feel like right when you inherently add combat, there will be more to their next game for me than there was with medium, just by default. But yeah, I never felt like budget for the medium was truly the issue. I thought they did some impressive things. I love the dual reality concept. Part of me almost wishes they could have a chance to take a second crack at that and make a better version of that game because I think there was a lot of potential there. That's sort of what made it semi-frustrating for me after I was done. I was like, man, I feel like there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I think most horror fans will just trade it off for Silent Hill. Did you find the medium scary or creepy at all? Because that was the other thing is I'm an easy target. I've been replaying the Dead Space trilogy. I just finished 2 last night, funny enough. And those games still get me. I've replayed them so many times. They still get me. Like I'm a very easy target. But when it comes to the medium, I don't really get rattled all that often. Yeah, I never did. Yeah, it was that one jump scare in the bathroom, and that
Oh
was it.
yeah,
That was,
yep.
this is the only time they got me, where you're peeping through the hole and you're like, oh,
And then,
there it is.
yep, right through the
Yeah.
people. I agree. I didn't think the medium was that scary fundamentally. I thought the areas that the medium succeeded for me were in the atmosphere and the way that they presented this story. And basically, Marianne was just an interesting character for me because of, I guess, when with someone with her abilities, like being able to see the other side. What scares you at that point? How do you get scared if that
Yeah.
is your reality? Is you are just seeing these ghosts and these figures of darkness, and that's just your reality. So I agree, it wasn't that scary. Like you said, there was the one jump scare. I thought the storytelling was the most compelling reason to see this through. Is seeing the dynamics of all these characters interwoven and figuring out the relationships through the journals. And it's a game that I played through once and I had a lot of questions. And then I played through a second time, and a lot of those questions were answered. A lot of the subtleties and the nuance were kind of discovered through playing it again. And I was actually DMing the writer of the game after I beat it because
Oh.
the ending, as you know, is very polarizing. The ending is, for me, I was like, that's how you're gonna end it? You're really gonna? I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't played it, but the ending is polarizing, and the ending is like, come on. So I DM'd the writer of this game after I beat it. I was like, bro, what's with that ending, dude? What's going on with that ending? Why would you leave me hanging like that? What's up with this? So I started asking all these questions about what this meant for the future. And again, he's not going to confirm that they're working on a sequel, but they have left this world open to be re-explored through other characters. So I'm not going to spoil it because the ending it's polarizing, but it is a big moment in the game. So like you said,
Yeah.
I want to see this world expanded further. We got a taste of the powers. Like once you started getting some of Marianne's powers, like the orb, and then as the other character, you got a little bit of combat, like you could fight back against these little like tentacles. I was like, I want to see more of that. Expand, make this feel like Control. Expand the world out. Give me all these supernatural powers and let me fight some demons.
Yeah, right. I feel like that's where they were heading, and maybe that's where the budget constraints kicked in, where they said, "All right, let's just ship this as is and hope it does well enough where in the sequel we can justify adding all of this and it'll be a major step forward." Um, I would love to see that because it was one of those games where I thought the first hour was really good. I thought the way they set the tone and some of the ideas for its world was actually really interesting. And then it meandered for the next 8 hours, and then as it started to begin again, it ended. And that was, more so just adding on to what you were saying about the ending is they have flashes of potential. That's what's kind of interesting about Bloober Team is you go, oh, you can't help it, you can't sign them off, right? I don't write them off and say, oh, they're gonna botch Silent Hill. I don't think that about them because I see moments in their games where I'm like, this works here. This is pretty good here. Or this is a great idea. It's just off a little bit. They can just get on point for a game. They'll make something really special. And I know that sounds obvious, but more so to my point is they, for me at least, they miss more often than they don't. So if they hit more often, on things like good storytelling and dialogue, intriguing gameplay, and not just sort of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not trying to be grotesque. Horror obsessive, and by that I mean like just pick up an object and rotate the shoe and be like, "Aren't you immersed?" Like, no, not
Not
really. Like,
quite.
do something to build the atmosphere more. There's a laundry list. Once again, their sound is no issue whatsoever, especially with I think his name is Akira, right?
Mhm.
Yamaoka.
Yeah, Yamaoka.
Having him handle the soundtrack just does a phenomenal job. And so it's really just gameplay. It's gameplay to me, and I'm not one of those people typically who beats the drum of you need to give me tons of powers and weapons and all that stuff. I've played Outlast. I love the idea of feeling very vulnerable. I think if Medium had a couple more encounters, like when you had that invisible creature stalking you, we would have had something really cooking there. That was like the most exciting part of the game, in a manner of speaking. And so, as long as they up the encounters, even I think they'll be good, right? And I think Silent Hill naturally demands that. So I obviously they're going to be the team. I feel okay enough with it that I'm thinking they'll do better in their last try.
Cool. I appreciate that because people are passionate, and there's been some when it comes to Silent Hill, people have had this idea in their head of who's going to make it and what it's going to be and where it's going to be. And
Hmm.
then for a lot of folks, the Bloober Team wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't the idea. And so for some people, they've been very aggressive because this isn't what they wanted. And they have been completely writing off Bloober Team and saying that Bloober Team is the worst possible pick. Bloober Team is going to ruin the series. Bloober Team is going to do X, Y, and Z. Bloober Team is incapable of making a great Silent Hill game. And I'm
Yeah.
100% in the opposite camp. Like, objectively, if you look at what Bloober Team has done with the resources that they have, you can't say there's no potential for a Bloober Team Silent Hill to be
Right.
great.
And not only that, but the thing is at the top of all of this, I said to you, well, if Bloober Team's not going to do it, I don't know who else would. There's very, very few developers in our industry outside of big AAA heavy hitters like a Capcom doing survival horror. We're hearing EA is going to do it with EA Motive for Dead Space,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't. Granted, I'm not super submersed into the genre. We have Red Barrel, but there aren't many independent horror devs.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I'm excited about. This is for them. This is likely a dream come true, man, and
Oh,
that to me is what's
absolutely.
exciting. The idea of a team busting their butt. Like for me, if I started up a development team and I worked hard, like Ninja Turtles is one of my favorite IP. If I could say, hey, can I make a Ninja Turtle turn-based RPG, and everything I'm doing is building that, and they finally hand me the IP, like yeah, you bet your butt, I'm going wild with it.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
putting myself in their shoes a little bit there and how they're likely feeling as a team, that does make me feel a little bit better about things. And like I said, there's no one else really quite doing it. Where what other option did Konami truly have? Unless the chat has someone in mind that I'm not thinking of, or you do. That's the other thing is who else would they have picked for a Silent Hill game?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a quick shout out to the almost 300 people rocking with us. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're new to the show, we stream every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're digging the show, hit that like button, share it out, subscribe, all that good jazz. But yes, you bring up an interesting point. Chat, people listening to the show right now. Do you think Bloober Team is a good fit? And if not, who realistically, that is the key thing. When I've been talking about Bloober Team making Silent Hill, I feel like they were the best realistic choice for making a Silent Hill. So I want to hear realistic options in the chat, not Kojima, please. No, Kojima is banned when it comes to suggesting that he make Silent Hill. As much as we want the dream of Kojima's Silent Hills to be a reality, that is not a realistic pick right now, in my eyes.
Yeah, I think he's got his hands tied, and not only that, but there's other news that we'll get into later. I'm sure that'll kind of dispel the idea of him working on a Silent Hill game. Maybe in the executive producer role, he could kind of oversee things, but even then, I think he's just hands off with it.
I agree. Yes, Silent Hills was a huge moment in gaming history. This wild possibility, Kojima and Guillermo del Toro collaborating on a Silent Hill game. It was literally too good to be true. It was literally way too good to be true. So we all want that, and there's people just latching onto that. And I think a lot of the frustrations online from a certain group, this isn't everyone, come from the fact that they expected Silent Hill to be a PS5 exclusive. They expected whatever team was going to be revealed to work on Silent Hill, that it would be a PlayStation 5 exclusive. And with the confirmation of Bloober Team working on it, that pretty much eliminates the idea that it is guaranteed to be a PS5 exclusive. And so for some folks who've had this idea in their head for years, it's been dominating forum discussions for years, that the next Silent Hill is going to be a PlayStation exclusive. That, for some people, I think fueled their outrage of Bloober Team.
Yeah. I personally haven't encountered the outrage, but more so the groaning. And that's probably just based off the audiences we formed and the places we've looked. Just off topic, I wanted to shout out someone in the chat, Ashu, mentioned as a developer idea. I saw Tango Gameworks was a pretty common one.
Yeah.
That is one I forgot because they haven't really done anything since The Evil Within 2. And that really wasn't too survival horror-y. That was the first one was. First one was excellent, in my opinion. And then I saw Asobo, which I thought was a really unique suggestion that I just wanted to individually single out just because they did a Plague Tale Innocence. And while it's not really horror, it does a good job making you feel vulnerable. It gives you a good tool set. And there's really rich atmosphere. Really kind of messed up game world. There's a distinct part I would like to call out that can kind of identify why I think they would do a good horror game, but I don't want to spoil stuff for people who haven't played it. It's on Game Pass. Please go download and play it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great pick.
That I just wanted to shout out that studio. That was a really good suggestion. I would like to see them try horror.
Yeah, I agree. I think Asobo Tango would be amazing because we know there's conversations, or at least Video Games Chronicle has reported that there are probably multiple projects being pitched or developed for Silent Hill, and one of them apparently is from a prominent Japanese developer. So Tango Gameworks fits that bill as a prominent Japanese developer who specializes in horror. So that would be pretty incredible to see. And then that would probably also really upset some people because they are owned by Xbox. So that would, instead of this being a PS5 exclusives, the conversations would shift to, is this going to be an Xbox exclusive Silent Hill?
Right.
And that, again, there's been some spicy takes there. I made a video earlier this week going down the rabbit hole because if you look at the Silent Hill official Twitter account, and again, this probably means absolutely nothing, but I have looked at their follower list for the last 8 months. It hasn't changed. They've had 25 followers for 8 months, and 4 of the 25 are people from Xbox. You have the Xbox official account, you have Phil Spencer, you have Aaron Greenberg, and you have Major Nelson. You could say, okay, they are just, active people on social media. Yes, they also follow the PlayStation official Twitter account, but that's it. PlayStation official, and then 4 people from Xbox. So if we want to put on those tinfoil hats and start talking about exclusivity conspiracies, in my mind right now, that is the most compelling information we have about where exclusivity could lie for the next Silent Hill. Again,
it's so funny. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, again, this doesn't necessarily mean anything, but if I'm putting my money on exclusivity right now, it's going towards Xbox based on this conspiracy.
Yeah, I just find it funny that they would lock this up as an exclusive only because I just listened to an interview yesterday. I think it was on IGN where there was an interview with Phil Spencer, and he was saying, yeah, we're really light on family-friendly content as he signs a deal for Silent Hill. It's like, to me, I just find that hilarious.
Yeah, we need some more E-titles, but we're going to go ahead and get Silent Hill instead. We're going to...
Yeah.
Quick shout out to the 326 people rocking with us. I see Binyabik. I see Paris in the chat. I see 9 Lives, a lot of awesome folks. Excited. I'm going to get to a couple super chats, and then we're going to transition into our next topic, which again, kind of more conspiracies, and it's going to involve our good pal Hideo Kojima. But super chat from Aaron JF94. Silent Hill already is most likely a 6 out of, or is most likely 6 out of 10 games anyway. So honestly, I think since they'll be getting a budget, they're expanding and they hired for combat. So I think Aaron's saying that, the history, if you look at the last several Silent Hill games, they haven't been good. They've been kind of bad. I've played them. Silent Hill Downpour was an absolute disaster of a Silent Hill game. Although Korn did the soundtrack, so maybe that's a selling point for some people.
Wait, what?
Yeah, go down the rabbit hole on that and check out some of the Korn music.
Korn? Like Twisted Transistor Korn?
Yes, Korn did some songs for Silent Hill Downpour. So
that's hilarious. I almost want to check that out. What system is this on?
It's on PS3 and Xbox 360. I don't think it's backwards compatible, so you'll have to have.
I have my 360 still hooked up. That's on the list. I need to experience that. That sounds incredible. That sounds spiritual.
It's a transformative experience. Definitely solidified the death of Silent Hill. That's for sure. Another super chat here from Jim Fetz. Great show. Tried the Scarlet Nexus demo and decided to buy it. Loving it so far. Cool combat, engaging story too. Nice to see JRPGs on Xbox. Have you played Scarlet Nexus?
I have it downloaded. I played 30 minutes. This usually isn't what I do, by the way. When I started up, I'm all in. But I'm in the middle of like a video project for Dead Space, and so that's been consuming my time. And I also started SMT4 on my 3DS because I'm a maniac, and I didn't want to get too spread thin. So I started up just to see, do I like the first half hour? Am I intrigued? Absolutely. This game just screams my name, so I'm very excited to get into it later this year. I'm going to finish it probably sometime this month, but right now my hands are tied with these projects. But yeah, Scarlet Nexus looked fantastic from the start. I had some concerns because they were very quiet on the marketing for it, but beyond that, I'm very excited to put my hands on it.
I've seen a lot of amazing clips from people on Twitter the last week who've been playing it. And yeah, the gameplay looks incredible, looks so stylish, so bright, so vivid. The world is really compelling too. It's this mix of like traditional and modern. Like it's kind of futuristic with some historic architecture in there from Japan. And they're using real locations from Japan. So there's a lot of care, it seems, that they put into it. I haven't played it myself. I've been playing a lot of Legend of Mana on PS5. Because it's not on Xbox, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a recent report from our good pal Jeff Grubb over at GamesBeat, who has he's been talking about the possibility of Kojima working with Xbox on a cloud-based game, an Xbox exclusive more specifically. And he last week reported that the reason they hired Kim Swift of ex-Google Stadia is because she was in charge of Google Stadia's cloud gaming division, and she was potentially, having a relationship with Kojima. And so he reported that the Kim Swift being brought on to Xbox was inherently to help Kojima bring his cloud-based game to life. And now he has reported that Kojima has signed a letter of intent with Xbox to work on an Xbox exclusive. So, what are your thoughts on Kojima making a cloud-based game for Xbox, as we've seen a lot of the conspiracies surrounding Abandoned and other Kojima projects? I've had people tell me that Kojima would never work with Xbox on an exclusive. What is your stance on Kojima's relationship with Xbox?
I think it makes a lot of sense. And the way I always explain it is through Game Pass. And I know we're going to probably use this reasoning for a lot of developers in the future, but I always felt that the Japanese market for Xbox stood to grow the most thanks to the explosive success of Game Pass, because I think one of the biggest problems with something like Death Stranding or any JRPG is its level of exposure to people, where they can safely try it, right? It's usually buy it for $60. No, that's definitely not for me. There's no easy entry. And so with Game Pass, maybe a game like Death Stranding isn't as divisive, and I think that's why it makes so much sense that Kojima can team up with Microsoft, who seems to have endlessly deep pockets. So you've got the money, and then you've got Game Pass for the exposure. You've got the legendary director there who can just be off the leash doing whatever he wants. It seems like a beautiful combination to me if you want my completely unfiltered opinion, just because while I'm not the biggest Kojima fan of all his work, um, I do like that in a AAA space he's trying new things and he's not just running down the same rabbit hole. I feel a lot of other game developers are. And so while I'm not in love with everything he does, I'm appreciative of the work he does. And with cloud stuff, yeah, we've seen cloud computing on the level of Microsoft Flight Simulator using Bing Maps to detail an entire world that we can then fly around. We saw it a little bit with Crackdown 3 and its Wrecking Zone multiplayer, although that got slimmed down for the final product.
Mhm.
So we've seen it time in, time out in variously different or different variants rather. And um, I haven't really seen one outside of Flight Simulator that's really maybe go, whoa, that's kind of crazy. Like you can fly to your house and land there and just see it. That's kind of wild to think about. But beyond that, I could only speculate on what he's going to do. But if there's someone who's going to do a cloud game right, I feel like Kojima would be that guy to sort of galaxy brain something.
I'm in the exact same camp. You bring up some amazing points that I totally agree with. I don't love every single project that Hideo Kojima puts out. Like, historically, I haven't been that big into stealth games. So Metal Gear Solid, I don't hate Metal Gear Solid by any means. It's just not my style. Death Stranding, again, a great concept, not something I'm in love with. But I respect the hell out of that dude for being weird and taking big risks in the AAA space because if we look at the tail end of the Xbox 360 generation and the PS3 generation, we were getting the same games over and over. Everyone wanted a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter, and we got, in the AAA space, that was it. Third-person shooters, first-person shooters for like 6-7 years. Nobody wanted to take any risks. So I appreciate Kojima for taking risks, and I would love to see him have a big sack of money to do whatever the hell he wants because, like it or not, you're not going to have to buy it. So you can dabble with the Kojima project through Game Pass, through the cloud, and there's not going to be this $60 financial investment. You can check it out. If you like it, cool. If you don't, move on and play something else. And I again, like you talked about, I think that's the beauty of Game Pass is you can try risks, you can make weird things, and then there's not this fear or pressure as a publisher or a developer that you have to sell 10 million copies or this is a flop, which is the situation that Death Stranding was in. Not something that I would consider a flop by any stretch. It sold pretty well, was received well, but I think for someone like PlayStation, they want those every single big first-party game to sell 10 million copies plus. That is kind of the roadmap that they want to see with their big budget games. And as legendary as Hideo Kojima is, that's not where he shines. His games probably aren't ever going to sell 10 million plus copies. And for me, that's not a problem. Let the dude be weird.
Exactly, right? We need that diversity, and that's why Xbox makes a lot of sense. We've heard reports that PlayStation is really trying to be more marketable. We'll say they're not really experimenting as often now. I think they'll continue to experiment, but I don't think it'll happen as frequently as we once saw. Like a Concrete Genie will probably be like a once a generation kind of thing. Um, and I think with that mindset as well, it sort of pushes Kojima to Xbox. Like, where can he go make the thing he wants to make? And for Xbox, let's be honest, is I can't imagine if you had like Phil and his team in a boardroom and they thought to themselves, what if we got Kojima? I know they say we're not in a war with PlayStation, and they're not, but they know the amount of momentum that would cause them to say, hey, we got the guy who's been making PlayStation games. We got the guy who literally left Konami, built a studio through PlayStation, and then joined us. Like, there's a major PR win in there that they have to know rabid fanboys will eat up, and not that they want to have people weaponize it, but they have to know that sort of emboldens their audience to go like, yes, we can even extract a guy who's had his heritage in PlayStation. That's how alluring our service is. Because Kojima being legendary in Japan, like, this just says to other Japanese developers, come here, come work with Xbox. So that's why I think Xbox is doing these big hirings for Kojima. A lot of people think it's like an ego stroke. I think it's more along the lines of, if you get Kojima, everyone else will get in line and say, how can we work with Xbox? How, like, and by everyone, I mean like in Japan, who's working on games. I think you're going to see a big spike over the next couple of years in Japanese games and Xbox. It's going to, I think, flip the script just because there's way too much exposure there to be left on the table.
Absolutely. Phil has been dead set on making Xbox something that's respected in Japan, which historically we know it hasn't sold well. We know it hasn't performed well in Japan. Already at the start of this generation, we are seeing Japan as a market for Xbox has the biggest growth of any market for Xbox. So they have some good momentum. You get a figure like Kojima, who's well respected, beloved in, Japanese circles, and like you said, that's going to have other people looking at what Xbox is doing and saying, okay, if someone like Kojima sees value in working with Xbox, maybe we should at least have that conversation, see where we can fit in, because I guarantee the conversations with Kojima and Phil Spencer were probably like, hey, what do you want to do? What is your dream project?
Right.
What is this project you've been sitting on that you want to work on? And then, apparently in this case, Kojima's like, I want to make this cloud-based project. I want to do something that people can access and have this interconnected whatever. Again, we don't really know what the game is, but then you have Phil Spencer be like, let's do it. We will literally hire Kim.
I think he said he wanted to make something more uplifting. Sorry, I just want to throw it out there because he had that whole talk with Jeff Keighley on how this last year's been depressing, and he compared it to like 9/11 or something, and then he was just, and then so I think he's indicating his next game will be a little more happy. But sorry, go on. I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, that you bring up an interesting point. We had this conversation I think last week or maybe the week before, but he talked about how games should be fun. And historically, he's had a lot of like political undertones in his games. So I don't know that it's necessarily going to be uplifting, because I think he still wants to make a weird ass horror game, but I think it's not going to have the political undertones, and it's going to be more about the game being fun and less about, because you look at Death Stranding and you can point parallels to what has happened in America over the last several years, and Death Stranding kind of predicting that. So I think some of that stuff for him got too real, and he's like, I don't know, that's not fun to talk about. So
I'm too smart, he says.
Yeah, I predicted the future, so I'm gonna dial it back. Okay.
Yeah, right. Well, because that clip from Metal Gear Solid 2 at the ending went viral, just because it sort of predicted the trend of social media and connectivity through the internet, and then Death Stranding became more relevant in 2020. Yeah, I can understand why things got a little too real for him, and he went, "Hey, let me just make something a little more fantastical. Surely this won't happen, right? Like,
Yeah,
surely I won't." Like, if he starts throwing like beasts in the game, he's like, "These won't come to Earth," and as suddenly we experience an alien invasion in 2024 or something like.
And that's when he announces his retirement. He's too alpha brain. He's
Yeah.
It's like Alan Wake. The things that he's writing become reality. He's dictating our future here. But yeah. So I think with Kojima and Xbox, it was, hey, what do you want to do, and how can we help you do that? And just having Kojima on the Xbox portfolio, there's a lot of value there. Again, people try to write off what Kojima does. I don't like his games, blah, blah, blah. But there is value to having a Kojima game on your platform.
Absolutely. I think it does more for the core gaming circle, like you, me, people who are here in the chat. Like, we're more invested where we're going to have these types of talks. Will it impact the overall trajectory of how many Xboxes are sold? Probably not here, but in Japan, yeah, for sure. Like, I could see that having a major impact. So I think, well, in that same interview that I was referring with IGN, Phil talked about how they needed to be more global. And so I think this is one of those moves to do that. I think they need to start really planting the seeds. They kind of dominate the Western RPG market. They have some of the best first-person shooter IP in gaming. Like, they have a lot of accessible stuff that's going to sell Xboxes, and now they need to tackle something like Japan in a more serious manner. Whether that be, of course, that's a rabbit hole to get into, but a studio acquisition or just signing on key figures like Kojima and then letting Game Pass do a lot of the heavy lifting afterwards with getting big JRPGs on. Like, I thought Scarlet Nexus was a guarantee. I don't know about you, but I thought with the way Scarlet Nexus was so quiet, I was like, this game needs Game Pass. I hope it sold well, but no one was talking about it. Not because it looked bad, just no one was talking about it. Sometimes there's these great games that just don't catch any fire on social media feeds. And this was shown at pretty much every major Xbox showcase outside of E3, strangely enough. But yeah, this was one I was really betting on being on Game Pass. So I anticipate that happening as in finally after this, more Japanese games head to Game Pass. But I don't know. Did you find that being a potential Game Pass pick?
I totally did. Yeah, there's an interesting correlation to how Xbox is approaching marketing for specific games and their relationship to Xbox Game Pass. We know that Xbox Game Pass is the most important metric for Xbox right now. More than console sales, more than anything else, Xbox wants people to sign up for Xbox Game Pass. So Xbox was pushing Scarlet Nexus a lot. All of their events for a stretch of time featured Scarlet Nexus in some capacity. So that made me think, yeah, this is probably going to launch in Xbox Game Pass. They're pushing this really hard. It's not here at launch, but I still wonder if they were putting this energy and excitement and publicity on it because they knew at some point it would be coming to Game Pass. And when it does, even if it's not necessarily at launch, there's still going to be this kind of momentum behind that. I found some other interesting correlations to Elden Ring. Again, this is just conspiracy theory talk, but one thing I noticed about the Elden Ring reveal trailer, even though it was at the Game Awards and there was all these conversations around it being revealed on the Xbox stage for E3, almost every single key person from Xbox on Twitter quote tweeted this gameplay reveal, which I found very fascinating because I again, this is just my conspiracy brain and this often doesn't correlate to anything, but I've never seen any game reveal get quote tweeted by that percentage of people from Xbox ever. Which, again, there's been conversations, will Elden Ring launch in Game Pass? There's been the controversy of, like, did PlayStation retaliate against Bandai Namco, and that's why it was at the Summer Game Fest? So there's all these conversations about, Elden Ring, because it's such a big deal. We saw the Sekiro tease on Phil's shelves. We know Phil Spencer's shelves carry weight. The Luden statue next to the Xbox light on his shelf was not there for no reason. We've been talking about that for a long time. It was not there for no reason. Talked about that back then. Talking about it again now. That Sekiro Steelbook case. It doesn't look that cool. Like, it's not something you would normally put on a shelf. There is a reason that Sekiro Steelbook case was on the shelf. Again, this is conspiracy talk, tinfoil hat time, if you will. But maybe
he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. Come on, like Phil does that stuff intentionally, and so yeah, there are definitely connections there. Elden Ring would be a shocking one because what I've said with Game Pass, this isn't criticism, by the way, but they really have yet to get and I put this in quotes, big fish when it comes to a third party. Like, this game's going to sell well regardless if it's on Game Pass or not. Like, I think Elden Ring will sell fine no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
And they have yet to have that kind of game, right? You got Outriders. Outriders did fine, but that was not like a big fish kind of get. So they have yet to really nail that, and I wonder if that will be their first one. That being, of course, Elden Ring. That'd be really interesting to see.
That would... See, it's fun to talk about those possibilities because people obsess about exclusivity between PlayStation and Xbox, and people were fighting about Elden Ring being a PlayStation exclusive or Xbox exclusive or whatever. I think what is more impactful for Xbox is a big third-party release not being exclusive, being multi-platform, but launching day one into Xbox Game Pass. That carries a lot of weight, and no matter who you are, $60 is $60. Like, if you have an Xbox and you have a PS5, are you really going to pay the $60 when you can play it on Game Pass?
Exactly right. That's the thing is, I feel like their method of attack is just going to be hitting up the third party as frequently as they can, because that's how you eventually like kneecap anyone who's investing in PlayStation hardware. Is you just realize like, oh, I've spent, say you buy 2 games that end up coming to Game Pass. I've spent $140 on these 2 games coming to PS5 when I could have spent $15 a month on a Game Pass Ultimate subscription and got that and plenty more. I think that method of attack is just going to eventually weed more and more people out. It's a battle of attrition, right? Just people need to realize, wow, I've spent more money, and some people have the luxury of not caring, and to them, more power to you. But for most of us out there, it's like, oh wow, I've spent way more than I really need to, because instead you take that now $110, you could put it towards gas, food, like so on and so forth. There's just, it's such an easy way to save money, and so I think as long as they stay aggressive with third party, that service will continue to explode.
I totally agree. I think MLB The
Yeah.
Show was kind of the first like mission statement of like we are going to
Yes,
get.
I should have. Yeah, that's a really good
I think
example.
that was
Yeah.
the first example of like the biggest third party games have a possibility to be in Game Pass.
Yeah.
And sure, people can point to that one didn't get received as well, but MLB The Show is a huge deal every year. People literally buy a PlayStation only for MLB The Show. I can point to 5 people I
It's
know
fantastic.
personally who buy 2 games a year. They buy Call of Duty and they buy MLB The Show, and they have a PlayStation because of that. So that launching in a Game Pass kind of blew the gates wide open for what could potentially launch into the service. I guarantee Xbox is at least making these calls and having these conversations with Bandai saying, yo, like,
Yeah,
what can we do? We know,
absolutely.
I guess we don't know, but there was the kind of drama controversy with Capcom, like that data leak. And again, I think some of this was debunked, so I'm not going to say that this is the reality, but there were conversations that PlayStation is saying if we market your game at all, if we have any marketing contract with your game, it cannot come
Mm.
to something like Xbox Game Pass for a year. Again, I think some of this was debunked, so I'm not going to say that this
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah, some of it was, or at least that's what I was told.
But I imagine if you're PlayStation and you are paying to market a game that you absolutely don't want it to launch in Xbox Game Pass. If you're putting all this time and effort and money into promoting a game and then Xbox says, "Hey, it's launching in Game Pass." That marketing money's gone.
Huge difference maker. Yeah.
Because they can put out a blog post saying Resident Evil Village is coming to Game Pass, and all of the year of marketing that you have for PlayStation is basically dead,
I mean,
in the
yeah,
blog post.
that's pretty much what happened with MLB The Show, right? I can't imagine anyone at PlayStation was thrilled to see that the second best selling sports game of all time was MLB The Show 21. Granted, there's a perfect chemistry there of day one Game Pass and the pop of the announcement, and of course Xbox fans being hungry for a baseball game. They haven't had one since really the MLB 2K days, or there's RBI baseball there, but like nothing as phenomenal as the show. And so yeah, there was probably like I said, a good pop there just with how everything synchronized, but still, that type of damage when you spend all that time making the game, marketing it. I know they still get a cut of it. It's still their PlayStation game, but I wonder how thrilled they are when that type of stuff transpires. And yeah, they have to be on the lookout for that when they make investments. You have to avoid Xbox more than you ever have before. It's not just it no longer is it just let's make a third party exclusivity deal. It could be one or the other, which allows them to cover way more ground because a Game Pass deal is just not simpler to put together in the sense of like I could walk in there and strike up a deal with the dev, but I'm saying it's easier to probably come to agreement on than pure exclusivity.
Yeah, you bring up PlayStation probably being unhappy with MLB The Show launching in Game Pass. One example of us knowing they're unhappy is if you go to their official Twitter account. It lists Xbox as a platform. It lists PlayStation as a platform. There's not a
Hmm.
single mention on MLB The Show's Twitter account of Xbox Game Pass. The official MLB The Show account does not acknowledge Xbox Game Pass ever, not once. Not a retweet, not a like, not a post about it. It is so comical to me, and that solidifies that there is
That's
some
actually great. I did not know that.
and there's some
That's great.
salt there. They had to be so upset because, from what I understand, this was MLB coming basically spearheading this, saying we want this
Yeah.
on Game Pass. Let's go.
Yep.
Let's get this on Game Pass.
100%.
So you have a PlayStation developed studio having one of their biggest, one of their most important IP annually launch an Xbox Game Pass, and it's gotta hurt. It's gotta hurt a little bit, even if you don't want to address it publicly. We know they felt it a little
Yeah,
bit.
it stings.
It stings.
And it's not even to be like fanboyish about it. It's not to say like, oh, we're trying to stoke the console wars. No,
Exactly.
it really is just it's their IP. They're protective of it. They being Xbox circumvented a way to get to the MLB to then get the game on Game Pass. It's like they were probably blindsided by it, man. Imagine us who woke up and went, wait, another day one Game Pass game in April? What's going on? And it's MLB The Show. And imagine what PlayStation woke up to. Like, what the? is this? Are
What
you
the
kidding? Yeah, yeah.
dude? Oh, because
I would have killed to be a fly on the wall. I really would have.
yeah, this is the first time MLB The Show is ever coming to Xbox. So that already, they're probably upset that MLB is like, you have to make this third party. It can't be an exclusive. So the first time it's ever coming to Xbox, it's also launching in Game Pass. It's again,
Mm.
on the outside, Xbox, Phil Spencer, they're all nice, they're all friendly, they're all chummy. But then you look at a move like that and you're like, these guys are brutal. That is a brutal move, like to your competition.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm too.
Yeah, perfect storm. Got to give a quick shout out to the 450 people hanging with us. You guys are digging the show. Like it, share it out. Let's see how big we can pop this party off. I'm gonna get to a couple super chats real quick. We got one from Aaron. Oh, clarifying his comment. My point with the 6 out of 10 is just to say give Bloober a chance to try. I agree. Give Bloober a chance. That's all I'm asking. Because again, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to circle back to that, but the negativity that I saw on social media about Bloober was, it kind of caught me off guard. Like, I knew some people would be upset, but I didn't expect people to be that just cutthroat and disgusting and nasty about it. So
It goes the thing, not like you said, not to circle back to it. It's not that they are bad, right? They're not a bad team. That's why it shouldn't get that brutal. Like, I'm someone who makes it pretty well known. I don't like their games, but they're not because they're bad. They're just, to me, boring. And maybe for some people, for me at least, that's worse. But to my point is, yeah, I don't think it deserves the aggression, especially when we don't know what it is, right? We don't know at all what it is. Of course, it's going to be Silent Hill, but I'm saying beyond that, we don't know what is the budget looking like for this game. What kind of ideas do they have for it? I think there's a lot more that remains to be seen. But then again, the marketing for the medium got me. I was pretty on board with that game, and it did not deliver at all what I expected. So
yeah,
I could go on.
Super chat from Cadaver. I've always wanted Xbox to work with or acquire Level 5. They're big enough to work as a publisher for Xbox in Japan to attract the talent there. Level 5 would be an interesting get if they're trying to kind of expand in Japan.
Yeah, I was thinking Cyber Connect 2 as well the other night. I don't know why that just came to my mind because they're doing some type of independent game. I apologize. I don't remember the name right now, but they're obviously more known for their work on like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and the Ninja Storm games. I was thinking to myself, I mean, they get on fine, but they also did Dot Hack, that whole series. So I look at them and think, what if Cyber Connect was extracted at some point? That would be another interesting pick. But Level 5 makes more sense because I think they said they were done doing something with gaming, just with the way certain things played out, which was really unfortunate because I loved Ni no Kuni. And I thought they did good work on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to see Xbox get in there, get involved, and get something done.
So let's go down some hypotheticals here. Let's say this Kojima Xbox project comes to fruition. This helps Xbox get some momentum in Japan. For you, if you're Phil Spencer, if you're the head of Xbox, who is your next target when it comes to making Xbox the console in Japan? If you're trying to steal market share back from PlayStation and Nintendo, who are you actively going for?
If anyone who's watching this is a fan of me, they probably already knew my answer before you finish your sentence. Persona Studio, P Studio, 100%. Just get a Persona game on Xbox. I think there's a hunger for that kind of in a more core way, kind of like the show. Like Xbox fans really want Persona. I think you make a pretty big statement in general if you get Persona on Xbox. That's kind of like the Yakuza series. It's always been quietly this PlayStation exclusive franchise, and now I'd say thanks to Game Pass, Yakuza sort of flipped the script. Now it's this big multi-platform success. So if I'm Xbox, I call Sega. I go, what do we got to do to get Persona on Xbox? 3, 4, 5. Let's make it a big deal. And what do we got to do for 6? I think you make a pretty big JRPG statement because that's one thing they did with the 360. They had an underrated kind of statement for JRPGs with the 360. Just they were almost too niche. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Lost Odyssey is phenomenal, but that didn't really get the pop it deserved. Infinite Undiscovered, they teamed up with Square Enix for that, and I think that was sensible. And then the other one was Operation Darkness. They teamed up with Atlas, and that was awesome to see. It was this kind of Fire Emblem style game that crosses over vampires and werewolves with World War II and anime. It is so cool. It is such an incredible game. It's hard as nails, or tough as nails. But more to my point is, I think they sometimes went a little too fine. So I think Persona is this middle ground that they really need, where it's like, this is popular. This is still a JRPG. This addresses a need. So I'd pick up the phone and call them right away.
Yeah.
We've heard as much that Persona eventually will come to Xbox, but I feel like because it's such an inevitability that anyone could say that and not even have a source, right? They could just say like, yeah, it's coming, it's coming.
Yeah,
Yeah, one day it truly will, right?
Called it. Yeah, because we've seen Yakuza, we've seen Final Fantasy, and Game Pass has kind of been the vessel for like taking some of these historically PlayStation exclusive franchises and getting them on Xbox. Like, I remember seeing the big splash screen for basically every single Final Fantasy game was going to come to Xbox Game Pass. And I was like, wow, that is awesome. Some of these have never been on an Xbox platform. Same thing with Yakuza. And like, every single Yakuza game is going to be coming to Xbox Game Pass. I want that for Persona, at least the ones that are doable and like have modern versions.
Yeah.
I want that. I want that big splash because Persona is a big deal. And, stuff like Yakuza and Persona is becoming less and less niche. And it is people are kind of more open to trying these kind of.
And it's through Game Pass, right? I don't think Yakuza grows as much as it does if it doesn't have Game Pass. It's just a reality. I played it before it was on Game Pass with like Kiwami 1 and 2. They're amazing games. But I'm thrilled that through Game Pass people have been exposed to them and now they can just download the entire series, all 6 of Kiryu's story, and now a new one with Like a Dragon with, I think his name is Ichiban, which is just like this love letter to all the JRPG stereotypes. It's just an incredible franchise, and so it's getting what it deserves. There's rumors now of Judgment coming to Game Pass, so I can't imagine to just to have myself buy in a little bit more mentally. I can't imagine you have one and not the other. So by that I mean, if you're going to bring Yakuza over and you're seeing the success of Yakuza, I'm sure Sega has to be looking at Persona and going, how do we do this? How do we do this?
Yeah.
Of course, PC Game Pass is one thing. And I'm sure that was like their first thing was like, let's get Persona 4 Golden on PC Game Pass. If I was Phil, I'd be like, no. Xbox. Get it on the console, right? Like Xbox.
I'm 100%. We're seeing momentum with like Dragon Quest. That is, we're seeing more of that come to Xbox and launch in Game Pass. We need the Mana series. There's no Legend of Mana series or Mana games on Xbox right now. That needs to be corrected. They need to keep up this momentum, and it can't be this case where like Legend of Mana HD, I'll use it as an example, is coming out on, or it came out on every single platform except for Xbox. Came out on PC. Came out on PlayStation, came out on Switch. This isn't somebody buying exclusivity. This isn't PlayStation buying exclusivity for this game. This is the publisher, for whatever reason, saying, we don't feel there's even a reason to put this out on Xbox. And so
Xbox is to pay for it, probably, right?
Yeah,
like,
so if you're trying to be the best place to play, like, you can't have these exceptions constantly where it's coming to every single platform but yours, because that says that this publisher feels that there is no audience for this game on your platform, so they're not going to make a port.
Yeah, it says a lot.
Couple super chats here. Vitalis Obidi, do you think Indiana Jones has more potential to be exclusive since they showed they are willing to make a deal with Disney with Pirates of the Caribbean? Ooh, people love exclusivity talk, Maddie. Indiana Jones, do you think that's going to be an Xbox exclusive?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
I think at this...
Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, I think at this point, after what we saw from the game showcase, yeah, I think that's gonna
be exactly. And if you needed more proof, look at Spider-Man. Spider-Man is way bigger. A lot of people always go, "Oh, Sony owns Spider-Man." It's like, no, they own the movie rights to Spider-Man. They do not own Spider-Man as a whole. So that was a actual choice by Marvel to say, let's lock down Spider-Man to the PlayStation consoles. It worked out very well. Game's phenomenal, and not only that, it sold like hotcakes. So something like Indiana Jones, which is legendary, but let's be honest, smaller. I say it as an Indiana Jones fan, smaller compared to Spider-Man, which is this recognizable figure across all ages. Yeah, they're gonna lock it down. And plus, we've always seen Xbox say they wanted their Uncharted. Remember when they said they wanted it, and then they tied down? I think it was Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Yep.
And let's be honest, what inspired Uncharted in a lot of ways was Indiana Jones. Now you've got that, right? Now you've got the true Uncharted experience, maybe. And by that I mean like what they were aiming for the whole time. Um, and so I think they just locked it down on that alone, personally.
I mean, yes, we know Xbox right now. The reason that they acquired Bethesda is because they knew what they were working on. They saw the slate and they wanted to bolster Xbox Game Pass. And so the
Hmm.
more exclusive games they have from those teams, the more they can bolster Xbox Game Pass. So Indiana
Right.
Jones as an exclusive, that again, maybe not as big as Spider-Man like you said, but that's still a big deal. Imagine a scenario
Absolutely.
where E3 a year or two from now, we got Harrison Ford. They bring out Harrison Ford and he's like, "Yo, we got Harrison Ford as the voice actor for Indiana Jones in the Indiana
I would
Jones
love
game.
that.
This is an Xbox exclusive." People are going to be hyped about that. People are going to be excited. So yeah, I think, we're in a, unfortunately for people who only have one platform, we are in a war of exclusives like we've probably never seen before. People
Hmm.
are giving you a reason to buy into their ecosystem. PlayStation is going to be buying up a lot of exclusives. Xbox is going to be leveraging Xbox Game Pass and their first party partners to have exclusives as well. So I know there was a phase where exclusives kind of went by the wayside, but I think we're kind of heading in a direction where, again, people can have whatever stance they want on this. There's going to be more exclusives than probably we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
Because Phil wants you to sign up for Xbox Game Pass. PlayStation doesn't want you to sign up for Xbox Game Pass. So they're going to be throwing some big money around to make sure that, the other team isn't winning.
Absolutely. Well said.
Super chat from DS Omen. Let's say you're a Sony spy working at Xbox. Your goal is to tank the quality of games that are on Xbox Game Pass. What studio would you acquire? What is okay? So this question is: you
Wait.
are you are a spy from Sony who's infiltrated the Xbox headquarters. You are in there for the main purpose of pitching bad studio acquisitions so you can have bad games on Xbox Game Pass.
That's actually hilarious.
Do you have any?
Wow.
I mean, I don't know. I can't think of a
Um, oh man, it's so funny. If Konami wasn't getting back into the gaming space, I'd be like, go get them, right? Go get them. They care. They love their games, clearly. I would also say go tap Deep Silver on the shoulder and make a Ride to Hell Retribution sequel. Ask Bethesda if they can revive Rogue Warrior, make a sequel for that. I think it's got a real chance. Keep the old dialogue, remaster that game. Yeah, I would. I could go on. I run a series called Humanities vs. Video Games, so I play more really bad games than I think the average person does because I dive into the worst of the worst. So yeah, I go revive Batman Dark Tomorrow. I don't know if anyone's played that, but oh, it's terrifying, man. It's terrifyingly bad.
Oh, dude, that's yeah. So yeah, you bring up some amazingly bad games. Duke Nukem Forever 2. If
Oh yes.
Xbox was looking to get a really bad game to launch an Xbox Game Pass, I think that would be a good one. Aliens Colonial Marines 2, if they want to reboot that, let's go. But as far as developers, I'm not gonna say one developer's awful and should be thrown in there. Super chat from Hargeet Chani. What do you think about the indie dev tweets against PlayStation? One dev showed revenue of 3% from PlayStation. Oh, that's a perfect super chat segue into the final kind of big topic of the show today, and that is
Right.
the conversations surrounding platform X, which was not even subtly suggested is PlayStation. There was an
Yeah.
indie developer who came out and he basically had this mega thread of grievances about working with PlayStation, stemming from this conference call or something that kind of broke down how it would work partnering with PlayStation. And he was very vocal about what PlayStation makes you do to get a game on the PlayStation platform, and the fact that you have to pay $25,000 if you want to have any discoverability in the store, and drop this pie chart showing that, like the super chat said, only 3% of the revenue generated for this person's last game came from this specific platform. So when you saw this, Maddie, what were your thoughts about someone being this vocal about one of the biggest publishers in gaming?
It sucks to see because I know Indy's got the most rough. There's already a lot of risk in the game if you're AAA. There's even more if you're indie. So to see that it was such a hurdle of a process for them, I know Xbox does likely the same thing with, financial limitations for exposure, like, pay this much, will feature it on the storefront. I get it, but at the same time, part of me thinks it's ridiculous. As someone who is, writing their own game as we speak, I can't help but look at it and just take notes, right? Just take notes of some of the processes that I'm learning about, and kind of read the room and see that I think a lot, I don't want to sound like a broken record because I did say the same thing for Japan, but a lot of indies are likely going to take up the Xbox front because back in like 2014, I said this on Defining Duke, there was this sort of indie renaissance where I felt like PlayStation was just on top of the world. You had the Vita, you had the PS3 kind of in its transition phase, and you had the PS4, and it was just this hybrid of of indie excellence where you could, play an indie game on your PS4, take it on your Vita. Some games were only on the Vita and they were wonderful. Eventually they would be brought to the PS4. And then that slowly phased out over time, and the Switch really took over as the primary indie console. And I think it's Xbox's turn because for these indie developers, they've sort of seen all you need is one big success to turn your indie company into something much more grand. And I think with Xbox, it's, once again, I'll just save everyone's ears the displeasure of hearing it again, but it really is to that exposure of Game Pass, and I think they're going to take note of that and utilize it to its fullest extent. And so I'm not surprised that this person would go out of their way to say, yeah, I mean, look, we've only made 3% of our revenue from PlayStation. I'm going to burn this bridge. I don't care because there's other platforms doing it way better. I have personally heard from people who have worked with PlayStation that the way the process is described to me, I don't know the ins and outs, but what I was told was it almost feels intentionally ancient, like they're trying to hold you out, which is clearly not their intention. But that's how ancient of a process it is, that it's really holding you back.
Yeah, that seems to be the sentiment, is that this particular developer was saying it felt like something from the early 2000s. Like the amount of hurdles that you get and what you have to do to get basically a blog post for your game is not worth the investment. And he specifically talks about how working with Xbox and working with Nintendo is a much better experience where they make more money and they get more exposure without having to pay these astronomical prices.
Right.
Game Pass, like you mentioned, again, I made the joke a few episodes ago that I get paid 15 cents every time I say Xbox Game Pass. But the reality is, and I've talked to countless indie developers about their experience working with Xbox Game Pass. I just interviewed the team from Moonglow Bay. They're going to be launching their title into Xbox Game Pass, and they had nothing but glowing things to say about the experience, saying that not only are they getting money up front, but they are getting free exposure in a huge way for their game. They're going to have this game played by more people than ever. And because Xbox is putting it in Xbox Game Pass, they want to promote it. So not only are they not paying $25,000 to promote this game, they are getting their game promoted through Xbox Game Pass. They're getting their game featured on the ID at Xbox stream they did it on Twitch a couple months ago. So they're getting all these like perks just for buying into the system, because one thing that Xbox is doing really well is they want indie developers to succeed on their platform, because that will pull in more indie developers. So they are working hard to make sure that indie developers look at Xbox as a platform and say, I want to work here. So that is huge for indies, and that is huge for Xbox. And I think you bring up a great point that, I think Xbox moving forward will be the place for indies. Switch, by virtue of just having units on units on units, has done really well for indies. But I think Xbox, in terms of actually fostering relationships and building teams up, I think they're doing the best job right now.
I agree, and it's exciting, right? It makes it feel like, not to keep saying it, I don't want to sound redundant, but just, as someone making their own game, it's just like one of those things that's exciting because you look at that and you go, you don't panic as much as maybe you would when that time comes of like, hey, there's a chance we could get on this platform and there's more exposure for us there. Like, you can't help but look at it because I always say at the end of the day, you just want to make something and not have to worry about the financial aspect of it. So if Xbox can be like, here's a lump sum, thanks for joining the service, and that's how deals work. With Game Pass, I've heard that. I've heard, rather, I shouldn't even say I've heard, like it's a source. Like I've done an interview where I've been told, sometimes it's per download. Like there's all different ways to strike the deal for however a developer wants to do it. So, for that level of control and financial incentive, I think it's just super attractive for independent developers.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's, like you said, there are different tiers to it. So sometimes it is a lump sum upfront. Sometimes it's a combination of money up front and then money on the side. But yeah, you look at these independent developers. Like I always like the story of the two brothers who did Cuphead. Um,
Yeah.
Inspirational story. They basically took out a second mortgage on their house and they did all this stuff to get the money set aside to make a game. That has got to be horrifying as that team. We are
Yeah.
literally investing where we live to be able to make this game. And if this doesn't succeed, we don't have anywhere to live. So people don't think about that aspect of it. Like any independent developer doesn't want to have to worry if they don't sell X copies, then their team's shutting down, their studio's shutting down.
Yeah.
Tim Schafer talks about this a lot prior to Xbox, about how they had to they couldn't really make the games they wanted to because they had to make games that on paper they could sell X copies. Otherwise, people's jobs were on the line, and he didn't want to, have this studio where people were getting fired because of what they made. So there is a
Right.
pressure to make a specific game and have it reach a specific audience, so you have money to make more games. And Xbox Game Pass is a great way to get tons of exposure without all of those risks. Because no matter
Yeah.
what, even if people don't buy it, you've gotten the money, so you can start working on your next project without fear of shutting down.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's really interesting that these people came forward and talked, because it wasn't just one developer. We had more people in this thread sharing their experiences, quote tweeting this, and we have PlayStation in a situation where they are the market leader. Financially, they just have been making the most money for the last several years, so they have this. I guess there's not a huge incentive for them to advertise these games. Like, you know what, you want to be on the biggest platform, pay us money. That's how it's going to be. And if you don't want to, sorry, someone else will. And that's kind of an old school, kind of extreme business mentality that Sony is in. But as we've seen with their practices, that's just kind of where they're at. Sony is kind of tied to its history of being this kind of old school business, and they're transitioning and they're trying to, kind of get with the times a little bit more. But what are your thoughts on PlayStation's history with being the market leader? Do you think we're going to see a shift? Is PlayStation going to start losing market share? And because of that, like we saw with Xbox, will they start changing these kind of old practices?
Um, I don't think so. I think it's going to balance out more so because I've noticed a lot of folks think because like Xbox is doing well, that means Sony's faltering. Like Sony's still doing better than they've ever done. Xbox is selling every console that they put in stock for the series. So I think both companies are sort of thriving, and what you're going to see is sort of a balancing out, something much more akin to the tail end of the 360 and PS3
Yeah.
generation.
Hmm.
Um, and while I don't want to shortchange what indies do, it affects me, you, and more of the core gaming circle a bit more than your average consumer who might come in and just pick up their Madden, FIFA, whatever. But it does matter, and these little things do add up. I remember there was a big problem with I think it was because Devil May Cry 5 was one of those games, and PlayStation was known for many years to be like the visual novel platform, and it may sound very obscure in the scheme of things, it is, but then Nintendo's become that because PlayStation was censoring a ton. They were
Oh
they were
yeah.
adjusting everything a ton. It was not coming out as the original product that people wanted. And Nintendo of all places, family friendly Nintendo was the one posting stuff that was completely uncensored. It was what? Uh, so I feel like it's not death of a thousand cuts, but there will be a thousand cuts if they continue this up. Where we saw them sort of falter with backwards compatibility. You see them shutting down the storefront. They've reversed that. You see this indie business. Um, I think they've done a lot of great things this year too that don't get talked about enough. But it's mainly because of all the things that they've done, or really in this case, not done, that have just directly impacted their public image. So I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think that Xbox is going to suddenly overtake PlayStation. I think that'll take a full entire generation to really No. But I do think they will overtake them in the terms of conversation. I just think Game Pass is a way you can get frequent PR bursts when you need them.
Hmm.
When you outside, you Nadella coming out with a Halo Infinite sweatshirt going, we're all in on gaming. That is way bigger than I think anyone really understands. So they've got the money. You've got games getting ready to roll out. Like really 2022, 2023 is where you're going to finally, after all this time of waiting, start to see those studios that they invested in 2018, 2019 start releasing stuff for them exclusively. So I think it's going to be some time. I don't think PlayStation's quality is going to dip, but I do think towards the tail end of this generation, Xbox can edge them out for sure.
Yeah, it's obviously there's people invested in the team mentality. The sports analogy I always use. We're on different football teams. We all want our football team to win. Obviously, this is an Xbox centric show. But I don't buy into the hyperbole that PlayStation is doomed. We're starting to see that thrown around, that PlayStation is dying. Yeah. PlayStation's gonna go bankrupt. That's not the reality. Like you said, PlayStation is doing fine financially, but they are struggling from a PR perspective when you look at the most invested circles. A lot of journalists, a lot of industry enthusiasts are looking at PlayStation and saying, why aren't you doing this? Xbox is doing this. Why are you doing the opposite? In fact, you're not doing what we want you to do. You're doing the opposite of what we want you to do. What is with that? And as a fan, as a consumer, like that will start to chip away at people's kind of perception of PlayStation. So, like you said, I don't think it's going to be this thing where Xbox necessarily dominates PlayStation in the short term. But if PlayStation sits by and does nothing to change their business model, yeah, years from now we will see a drastic shift. I don't think PlayStation being as big as they are is going to sit by and just do nothing. But as the market leader, the incentive for them to do anything different hasn't been there. But now Xbox is putting pressure on them and saying, you know what, you have to. You can't sit there and just do what you've been doing because we're not going to let you do that. So the competition is just more exciting. It's more interesting this time around because Xbox One launched so miserably, and the
looks even worse now.
And the investment from Xbox was so pathetic for that entire generation that it just, like, the competition wasn't there. Like I still preferred Xbox, but I was not arguing anything that Xbox was doing as a positive. I wasn't telling you that Xbox launching with the Kinect was a good idea or the Xbox exclusives were absolute bangers. Like, that just wasn't the case for a long period of time.
Yeah, for me, it was a rare generation. I don't think I've ever had anything like it in my lifetime where I bought both. I had the Xbox One at launch. I was sold on the games. I thought the TV stuff, of course, like many others, was silly, but what games I saw available at launch compared to PlayStation spoke to me more. I was like, oh, Dead Rising, Rise looks great. Killer Instinct looks awesome. Let me go with Xbox. And so at launch, I thought it was pretty solid, but it all completely fell apart and it became very one-sided for me, which is something I've never experienced. I rarely, like, unless a review came around, I never touched my Xbox. And for Defining Duke, we get a write-in easily multiple times a week of people saying, I've finally switched back after abandoning them for a whole generation. So they are winning people back. Not to just, scoop into my own show and be like, yeah, look, the whole world represents this. But I imagine that indicates where a lot of people are at. That Xbox, I can't imagine they haven't won a lot of people back. And that's the most exciting part is you got two competitive companies now. I don't care who wins. Of course, as someone who runs an Xbox show, I'm more invested in, and I do Xbox news on my channel. I'm definitely more invested in seeing what they do, and I track their plays a little bit closer than PlayStation. But dude, I can't emphasize enough how refreshing it is to see them fighting. And you see, while PlayStation says they're not in an arms race, and they're not, they couldn't afford to be.
Yeah.
It's really exciting to see them make these strategic partnerships. Like, hey, yeah, Housemarque may not be the most surprising acquisition. It may not be I woke up one morning and suddenly Xbox owned all of Bethesda. Yeah, it may not have that pop. But I think it does have close to that level of significance in a way because they are shoring up the first party front. When you get them, Bluepoint is really leaked at this moment, and then they got Nix's for PC ports, which is sort of a statement to what they're doing there. They're making just intelligent acquisitions, and PlayStation hadn't made acquisition. They made one acquisition in the last decade. That was Insomniac.
Hmm.
Now they've made, once Blue Point's announced, three, and all of them came within the last year. So they're getting aggressive too, and that's what's exciting. Is now we're seeing a PlayStation in a number of ways, both good and bad, that we've never really seen before. So I think it's good that Microsoft is pushing them to act. Like, I think after MLB The Show, you have to imagine they feel a little scarred and wary and think, well, who else can they come in and take, right? They teamed up with Insomniac to do Sunset Overdrive. So just lock up who you've got. And it may not be the biggest flash in PR, but I still think it's exciting because they're competing.
Exactly. Yes. I have noticed the subtle kind of shade in these PR announcements from PlayStation when they talk about how they're not throwing money around and they're not just trying to buy up whoever essentially. But I am glad that they are, looking at how they invest in PlayStation and ensure that there is a steady pipeline of PlayStation content, PlayStation exclusive specifically. So Housemarque is a great get. They, Returnal launched. There were some bugs, but overall the game was received really well. People seem to dig it. I commend PlayStation for putting out a AAA game that's kind of more niche like that, this horror roguelike. So I was stoked to see that. That tells me that PlayStation isn't only going to put out God of War, Uncharted, Last of Us, and Spider-Man for the end of time. They are open to trying new things.
I give them a lot of credit. Their first two exclusive games, to me, were Demon Souls Remake and Returnal. Returnal I didn't play, but released. I mean, those are two pretty hardcore games. And I say hardcore with all due respect, but I mean that's not for everybody. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
And to have that in your launch window, I tip my cap to them that they sort of have waited out the Horizons and the God of Wars, and Ratchet's probably the most accessible thing they've dropped, but that's half a year into their life cycle now, a little bit more than that. And so I commend them a lot for their kind of diverse offerings, even if they're still in that third person open area DNA that we've seen across all their exclusives. Their style of gameplay is not for the faint of heart.
No, absolutely not. They've PlayStation, like you mentioned, with Demon Souls and Returnal, they have a pretty high percentage of brutally difficult games as exclusives, which is, again, for me as a bit of a masochist, I'm cool with that. I commend them for doing that, but it is kind of cool to see that because
I understand it. You're a masochist. You're like me. You're a Mega Man fan. Like I said before we recorded, I see the Mega Man stuff in the background. There. Have you played the Mega Man Zero series? Not to go too off topic here.
I've only played the first two. I've only played the first two.
Okay, yeah, so then right? Because after that, it eases up a little bit. But the first two are like, you have to be a masochist to play and beat those games, especially in their original form. Good lord! But
oh dude. See, I love it. So I love a good challenge. But yeah, I'm glad that PlayStation is invested in expanding, and that shows that they do want to compete, and they're not going to sit by and just say, okay, well, we have God of War, so we're good. That's, again, I mean, that worked last generation, having one big exclusive every few years because your competitor in Xbox didn't and wasn't competing. But now that Xbox has told you they're going to have one major AAA first party game every 3 months, if you're PlayStation, you're like, oh shit, okay, we need to ramp up what we're doing and we need to figure out realistic ways in the short term that we can do this. Because if Xbox, say 2022, they start off in January, there's a blog post, and they say, these are the 4 AAA games that are launching this year. That's going to have weight because they're telling you already that they're going to be able to deliver on this 4 AAA games per year.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really going to be exciting to see, like, when we start to hit that turning point of really next year, where we kick the dust off of last gen, we start to really shift towards old gen or new gen. I'm really excited to see where both these companies head.
I want to see those again. I guess people point to Ratchet and Clank as like the first kind of true exclusive, if you will. But I'm excited to see both PlayStation and Xbox deliver there. Like I think Hellblade 2 will be kind of like the first mind-blowing showcase of the future of Xbox, and I want to see what that is for PlayStation as well.
Yeah, because that's the thing is Xbox, we haven't really seen quite that. We've seen a showcase of it with Ratchet, as you said, where I got to be honest, as a lifelong Ratchet and Clank fan, it didn't blow me away. Like on a technical level, there were some really cool things happening, but it wasn't wowing me. It was sort of what I expected, which is good and bad. Um, with Xbox, though, we don't know what's going to represent their next gen future. Like Halo Infinite isn't even going to be that. Forza Horizon's not going to be that. Like that, those aren't their next gen games. It's a chance that Starfield may be that, or is it Fable? Is it Avowed? I mean, it could be in Compulsion's next game. That's what's the unfortunate part of their stuff being so far away. Is at least with PlayStation, I could look at Ratchet and go, oh, okay, beautiful, quick load times, lots happening on screen, big open explorable areas. All right, I get it. Like this is maybe a sample size of what's to come, and we can expand upon that in future games throughout the generation. Xbox doesn't really have that. We had the medium for times exclusive,
Yeah,
and
indie
that didn't
indie
really.
horror game, but
Yeah,
yeah.
right. No disrespect to the medium, just like it doesn't represent everything that the Series X can do. Outside of that, they needed to do the Series S and X only for the dual reality gameplay. So there is that.
Yeah, and I think Forza this year will be a good showcase of graphically kind of what we can expect, but it is going to be a cross gen release. But yeah, it will be interesting to see just kind of what the future holds because we haven't seen things like Xbox Velocity Architecture. I watched GameStack Live, saw a tech demo of what that can do for a game, and that got me really excited about the possibilities of an open world game where you're not as restricted. You're not going to have like grass pop in as much. And we haven't seen a lot of those truly new features utilized yet. So I'm
Mhm.
excited. And I'm wondering if maybe next year we'll start to see that. And I wonder when Xbox is going to back off of their cross release kind of strategy because
Right.
they did promise that ahead of time saying, hey, you know what, first year or two we will have first party AAA games that are cross platform. And I think especially with the way hardware is rolled out, that was probably the best case for them. But I am curious to see what the horizon looks like.
I like that.
Some super chats here. We got okay, Harjit Chani again. Xbox could grow beyond PlayStation if cloud streaming takes off. Availability in markets that can't afford consoles or $70 per game.
Mm,
Yeah, the cloud
yeah.
gaming stuff is in the US, and people who've been, like me, a filthy console heathen. There's people who write off the power of cloud streaming and the accessibility of mobile and what that means. But other markets, there are markets where people just don't buy a console, won't buy a console. So if you go to their phones, like a lot of Asian markets, that is huge. That is huge. Being able to play any of these games on your phone, that is going to boost the subscriber count for Xbox Game Pass. And if it's as simple as having Game Pass and you can play these games, that is going to open up, doors to audiences that right now Sony just cannot compete with. They don't have an infrastructure set up to compete right now.
Yeah. Yeah, the level of exposure there is insane and it works really well. I tried it the other day on my phone, tablet, and my computer, and 2 out of 3 worked really well, being my phone and my PC. It was just super crazy to finally, because I, as an Apple user across the board, I honestly haven't had the chance to try out xCloud or anything. So finally, like getting my hands on it, oh my God, it's just incredible to see it in action.
And now that's because I tried it when it first launched, and it was Xbox One S's as their server blade. So
Right.
it worked well enough. There was some latency. It was only 720p, but now that it's on Series X and it's 1080p 60, the
Mhm.
latency is like so drastically reduced compared to what it was that I feel like the average person, again, you can tell if you have a native console and cloud streaming, there is a noticeable difference for people who are invested in that experience. But the
Of course.
average person, I feel like, could play that, experience it, and not even they wouldn't even know that there was any sort of delay at all. Unless you're,
Right.
playing competitive shooters or fighting games, you're not gonna be able to tell that delay. And that, again, I talked about this last episode. You have people like Netflix is a prime example. I am willing to sacrifice visual quality through streaming. If I pay attention closely, if I have my 4K Ultra HD disc and I compare that to Netflix, I can see the artifacting of the shadows. I can tell there's degradation in the quality of the picture. I'm never touching that disc. I don't give a damn about that disc if I can just open up an app and stream it. I can look past that. And I think that is kind of the benefit of cloud streaming is because it's so damn convenient, who cares if there's a little tiny bit of latency? I think
Yeah,
realistically.
I agree.
Super chat from Eternal Umbra. Yo, I was up all night and dozed off, missing the first hour of the show, Miles, but wanted to show you guys some love. Congrats with getting Lord Cog, Matty.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lord
really excited
Cognito
about that.
joining the Cozy.
Yeah, dude, I'm beyond excited about that. I like when we reached out to him, he was like number one on my list of, this is the guy I want to get. And I was thrilled he was as excited as I was. I'll just say that. And our first episode with him goes live to the public this Sunday. So really excited to see the reaction from everyone else.
That's so cool. I was so stoked when I saw that. Lord Cognito is such an awesome dude. Been in the community for a long time. Iron Lord's podcast is incredible. That dude's such a killer host. I've been on that show. Does such an amazing job of just making me feel good. And I'm like, I love this dude. I love this dude.
He lifts everyone up in a way that's just not common in this industry.
No,
it's really not.
It was kind of caught me off guard. I was like, oh, I'm not this big of a deal. Why are you making it sound like I'm a big deal?
I feel the same way, man. He started listing off my whole career, that stuff that I'd even forgot about for the intro. He like labels everything you do, and I'm just like, wow, I forgot about that. And he hits it all. He does a really good job.
Yeah, so I will definitely check him out. Stoked to have him on. Super chat from Name Surname. I think Satya's message was not the simple media message, but the declaration to other companies, publishers, and platform holders. What is your take on that? Do you think the reason they came out with that blog post was not for the customer, but as a mission statement to the competition?
Yes, that's exactly. I thought for the timing was for the customer. E3 was right around the corner, so I feel it synchronized with that well. I'm not one of the people who thought like this past E3 from Xbox was their best one ever. I thought it was a great E3, by the way, but not their best one ever. But I thought they synchronized that mission statement with their with the E3 for a reason. But yeah, I think more than anything, it was to show the public, like for Phil to say, hey, if we get a public buy-in from you, people know you're at our back. Let's be honest, they know the money's there too, and more will come and work with us. So yeah, I 100% think that was a statement to companies at large that, hey, it's not just Xbox, it's Microsoft that is going to be making deals with you. That means a lot of financial gain is to be found there for all these businesses.
Yeah, I think that was really important because you hear these legacy stories of people like Major Nelson who've been with Xbox for years and years and kind of talk about how, Xbox was just this weird side thing. They're like, we want to do gaming, and Microsoft is like, okay, we'll give you some money. Here's your weird disconnected office away from Microsoft HQ. Go do your gaming thing or whatever. And now we're at a point where we have Phil on the board of Microsoft. Phil Spencer is a key, integral part of Microsoft as a whole. And then you have Satya, the head of Microsoft, coming out and saying loud and clear that we're all in on gaming. Because I think that has been a question mark and a concern, especially last generation, where we didn't see that support that Xbox needed to really successfully compete. And they have so much positive momentum this generation. And I think that was just to kind of like emphasize that everything you've seen so far, this is just the beginning. Like we are all in, and not only are we going to tell you that, but we are going to start showing you exactly that. And I think that ahead of E3 was amazing because they showed us how serious they were about Xbox Game Pass and how serious they were about exclusives with Bethesda.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's an exciting time to be an Xbox fan, but I think it's just an exciting time to be, an enthusiast in the gaming industry because PlayStation and Nintendo and Xbox, they're all doing it. They're all doing big things right now. People try to write off Switch and Nintendo. That thing is selling ridiculously well. It is outselling PS5 and all the series consoles every single week still somehow. And it's wild that there's I can't wrap my mind around it. I really can't. And people are like, Nintendo needs a Nintendo Switch Pro, otherwise they're going to die. And I'm like, do they though? I mean, I want one. I want one so damn bad, but they're looking at their sales and like, we're selling 130,000 of these babies a week. Do we need one? And it's just exciting to have all these companies really going for it and really successfully delivering on what they want to do right now.
Yep. I agree.
Super chat from Stefan Boxy, who says PlayStation can do a Disney Plus model, charge $70 for a new game and charge $15 a month for PlayStation Now with new games at $30 for 90 days. What do you think about this model? Is this
That'd be pretty competitive. I don't know if PlayStation would do that if they're selling 10 plus million copies of their $70 game. I don't know if they feel really hard pressed to do it. They're as long as they're financially comfortable, which I think they are, then I don't know how much they care about how well Game Pass does in certain regards. Obviously, if you have an MLB The Show situation, you have to be wary of it. But beyond that, I don't know if they've said they have their own Game Pass competitor coming. That was, I think, the end of last year that Jim Ryan had said that. And so now here we are in July, still nothing. I thought maybe that was the PS Plus collection, but it seems like that isn't going to be the case. So I think the Disney Plus model would probably be the most fitting thing for PlayStation, where they don't have to set up a whole streaming infrastructure like xCloud and make something along those lines. I feel like if they could just sell their already stellar games at a discounted price for those who buy into the service, they would be excited about that. But that also means PlayStation needs to establish rolling quarters of every quarter you have to have a first party game. Otherwise, you'll have a month that you'll pay for, or multiple months you'll pay for a subscription fee, and there'll be nothing there for you on the other end if it's just saving money on the next exclusive. But I imagine there'd be more beyond that. Maybe they roll it in the PS Plus. I'm not sure how they do it. They have to get really creative with it though, because you can't just set up a streaming infrastructure overnight.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure the conversations are happening, but it will take, if they hadn't started years ago, it will take them years to have a structure roll out and be successful. With that model, I have a question about, is PlayStation going to make it so you have to maintain that subscription? Let's say you subscribe for 1 month to buy the game at a discounted price. What if you just cancel your subscription next month? Do they take the game away, or did they allow people to?
Yeah, right. That's the question. What does Disney Plus do?
What is because they charge you $30 for I think it's like 20 or $30 for a rental. Like, you don't own that. You can watch Black Widow, I think, for 20 or $30. But you don't own that. You're basically paying for like an extremely premium movie rental.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I do see PlayStation taking that route of the sort of puffing your chest out premium approach. Yeah, do they let you cancel? That's the thing, is like, I feel like they have to add more to their service so that if they're saying subscribe to this new thing, this is just one of the many perks they're offering. And that's why I said maybe they roll it into PlayStation Plus as a new tier, right? They had like the silver and gold PS Plus. And then I wonder if they add like a new tier to that, which rolls this in for maybe $5 extra a month. Then you're paying $10 a month for PS Plus, and you have that package in there. That could be great. I think that could be a good competitive move.
Yeah, they need something, because I'll be real, the more people experience Game Pass and that value proposition, the more people are going to start questioning those $70 retail prices. Because
of course,
I have a PS5. I dig my PS5, but it cost me to get PlayStation Plus and Demon Souls. I paid like $130 on top of buying the console at launch. So to play one game on my PS5 at launch, it cost me about $700. And that hurts. That is a lot. And like, again, some people, money's not an option, and that's cool. But PlayStation is going to increasingly feel the pressure of the value of Xbox Game Pass, and they're going to have to give some incentive for the people who invest in their platform to get some kind of discount or some kind of bonus for buying into the PlayStation ecosystem. I do want to ask you, since we're on this topic of PlayStation monetization, with the acquisition of what is it, Nix's? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Nix's. Yes.
Nix's. We've had people say that PlayStation will never do day and date PS5 and PC releases. Do you think something like an acquisition for Nix's maintains that messaging? Or for me, I think this messaging paints to a world where they are trying to have certain PlayStation releases line up day and date.
I think they're looking into it. I don't want to say they've committed with this acquisition. I think you lock down this studio so that you can make sure you continuously have these PC ports. But they have a pretty good method for them, maybe not for the consumer, but for them rolling where you sell it on PS4 or PS5. It sells 20 million copies or whatever. It stops selling any copies at all, and any that are sold are for $10 a piece on sale. And then you bring it to PC with another couple of bells and whistles, and you sell it again for $40, a markdown price, and you make your money again. It's a way for them to keep recurrent revenue and kind of stretch out the games and give them those second wins. Where I think they talk about it, but I don't know if they'll actually ever do it because there's just too much long-term revenue for them to make by letting the game come out, do really well. Even like Days Gone, which I'm not saying it's a bad game. I wasn't crazy about it, but it didn't come out in the most polished state. And I don't think it was PlayStation Studios like best foray, but it still came out, sold extremely well, and it sold even more on PC.
Hmm.
So I think even when they have not their strongest effort, they've seen, okay, we can make a lot of money through this method. So I think it's definitely been discussed, but I don't think they'll do it.
Yeah, it is an interesting conversation because they've had a pretty good cadence of, testing the waters with these PC releases. Launched the PlayStation exclusive, but their hurdle has been these games have been developed for PlayStation. So they've had to have a separate team or that same team do a PC version. They haven't been
Mhm.
basically simultaneously developing a PC and PlayStation version at the same time. But it will be really interesting to see if they continue doing that. We put the game out, we wait a year, we wait 2 years, and then give you the PC version.
Yep.
Because as we've seen, when you release it on multiple platforms at once, there is more exposure. There's more discussion. There's more word of mouth. Outriders, not that great of a game necessarily. I thought it was pretty okay. But
Hmm.
it was number one on the Steam charts because there was just so much conversation about it and there was crossplay. And so you could basically play with anyone. If you were buying it on your Xbox, you tell your friend to get it on PC. So I'm wondering if they are looking at that, and I know they're having conversations, but I wonder if they're trying to downplay that because I think the smartest thing for them to do long term would eventually build to a place where they have these releases launch simultaneously on PlayStation and PC because again, I know the box and the console has been their strategy, but I know they're open to expanding that. And I feel like you're going to get more eyes and you're going to get more sales initially. So why delay it if you can get all of that money up front, which you can then turn around and invest into your next project? So you have a more consistent flow of revenue to support these projects as opposed to
Yep.
we got money here, wasn't exactly enough, but we're going to get more money 2 years from now. But again, I don't know. That's why they don't pay me the big bucks. Super chat from Sergeant Rake. Been here since the beginning, but finally became a member. Oh, snap. Appreciate that, Sergeant Rake. Thanks, man. Mr. Matty and Cog are awesome, but most of us come here for that Dompier spice. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so we're coming to the tail end of the show here. One more time for all the 400 amazing people who've been watching. Where can people find you?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you to the audience for being so kind and engaged. I was reading the chat the whole time. It was really awesome to see everyone respond to everything we had to say. If anyone wants to follow up, check out what I'm doing. You can search up MrMattyPlays on YouTube. Just type it in your search bar. You'll end up on my channel where just today or yesterday we dropped a video just of my Game Pass streaming impressions. Today we're dropping a news video talking about that Phil Spencer interview I highlighted it here in this show, as well as some comments from Todd Howard with the Telegram. So just a lot of Xbox news going on lately. It's been a really fun time. And on top of that, my Twitter account is on screen at G27status. If anyone wants to engage, by all means, I'd love to have you there. But just thank you all for having me. It means a lot to be asked to guest on something and just for people who want to hear some of my thoughts. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Maddie, it's been awesome having you on. I was stoked to have the Bloober conversation because I know we had some different takes, but
Yeah,
that's what I want to stress in the show is we can talk about things, we can have different ideas, and that's okay, and that's
of course.
what this is all about. So again, I appreciate you taking some time. To everyone who viewed, thanks so much. If you're new to the channel, We do this every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And with that being said, we are going to wrap this up. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you next week. Take care.
Take it easy.